Good afternoon and welcome to Flash Talks Session 1. My name is Laurel Bellman and I'm moderating this session. We're going to start with the presentation Salesforce plus FormAssembly equals user request magic, followed by Q&A. And then we're going to have a presentation on web testing with Cypress, followed by Q&A. I'm going to introduce the speakers before their talks. And please note that this is being recorded and an accessible video will be available for viewing on the IT Professionals Conference website in the coming weeks. And so with that, I would like to introduce Megan McDonald and Megan O'Rourke. If you want to just give me a second here, I'm going to go ahead and highlight them for everybody so you can see that everyone. There we are. Here they are. So this is Megan and Megan. And Megan McDonald is the CRM manager for the Division of Continuing Studies at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Her Salesforce journey began over a decade ago as an end user at a nonprofit organization focused on K-12 educational leadership. And she was happy to make the jump to higher ed at UW-Madison in 2018. And now she enjoys being a Salesforce wizard behind the curtain, building all of the cool things, managing integrations, and supporting end users on all the ways that Salesforce can help them work smarter. And our other presenter, Megan O'Rourke, serves as the Salesforce CRM administrator for the Division of Continuing Studies. Megan's career has centered in higher education. Most of this time was focused in career services and business development, but she always had a knack for the technical solutions and student information systems that facilitate our work with students and prospective students. As a system administrator, she is realizing her dream of joining the IT world. And with that, I will turn it over to Megan and Megan for their presentation.
Sounds good. I'll let Megan O start sharing her screen. So you just got to pop it over to the presentation.
Yep. Am I sharing the wrong screen?
Yeah, it's the Zoom event that you're sharing right now.
Got it. There we go.
Cool. Awesome. So welcome to our presentation. You can go ahead to the next slide. So I'm going to start us off with a little bit of context setting. So what is Salesforce? You may have heard about it, especially if you're watching the Winter Olympics. There were a lot of ads suddenly, so they've been in the public eye a little bit more. But if you don't really know much about it, it's a CRM, which means a constituent relationship management system, which pretty much just means it's a way to manage relationships and interactions. Salesforce's big claim to fame, they were the first ones to do it in a cloud-based way. And now they've reached out into pretty much every industry there is across the globe. It's like the biggest CRM on the planet. Here at UW-Madison, we have multiple large-scale Salesforce orgs or instances on campus. The one we're talking about today is the pre-enrollment org. That's the one that Megan O and I are admins for. It was the first one to launch on campus in 2018 as a partnership between the Division of Continuing Studies and then the Office of Admissions and Recruitment. Both units are using this Salesforce instance to track prospective student activity, including marketing, recruitment, and admissions data. At DCS, we do it in more of a high-touch way, where we're sort of doing one-to-one phone calls and texts that we're tracking about students, whereas Office of Admissions and Recruitment does it in a more high-volume way. But in both cases, we're kind of interested in the same type of data. At DCS, we support over 120 users that they represent 25 academic departments and over 100 distinct programs. Go to the next one. Today, we're sort of focusing on the event management functionality in Salesforce. So obviously, that's a really critical part of recruiting students is hosting events. And we host a wide variety of events for prospective students who are interested either in our professional degree and certificate programs or online undergraduate programs. Before COVID hit, we were doing a lot of stuff in person, going out to grad fairs and doing other in-person events before we pivoted to more webinars and virtual events, and now kind of making our way back to in-person. But regardless, we just do a wide variety. So program overviews, Q&A sessions, faculty spotlights, application assistance, and many other types of events. As kind of a quick summary, back in 2021, last year, we did over 200 events that we tracked in Salesforce. With 5,000 registrants across those events. And you can kind of see a snapshot. The powerful thing about managing events in Salesforce, we can kind of combine that event data with other data sources like student information system data, and really start to put together like a good snapshot for a particular event, how effective it was. Kind of like you could see here in this particular event, there were over 100 people that came, and that very last little bar is all the people who ended up enrolling. So you get a really nice view of like how what the impact of any given event was, and you can kind of plan it out accordingly. So I will now turn it over to Megan O to kind of talk about how we originally were managing that before she moves on to our current state.
All right, thanks, Megan. Yeah, so with those 200 events, and so all the data to set up that particular event, so time, location, all of the information that would ultimately get published to our website would be collected through a Qualtrics survey. Qualtrics does have a connection to Salesforce, but not the license that UW-Madison has. So our project managers, our enrollment coaches would fill out the Qualtrics survey request. That would create an email that was sent to Megan and I. And there was a lot of emails involved with all those 200 plus events. So for any one event, it could be 3 to 6 emails. So you can imagine emails going back and forth to approve the edits, to make edits, and all of that had to be copied and pasted directly into Salesforce by myself or Megan and to actually manually create the campaign record. So along with all the emails back and forth that we were trying to track, we were also managing a Google Doc outside of Salesforce just to keep track of how many events were going on and where we were in the setup process in the campaign, and ultimately the online registration form that the prospective students would fill out. So we figured there has got to be a better way to make this happen and utilize way less systems and maybe narrow it down just to FormAssembly and to Salesforce. So that's why we moved away from Qualtrics to FormAssembly, because it does have a connection that we can utilize back to our Salesforce org. So I'm going to exit out of this and kind of show you. We're actually going to go do a little bit of demo of a totally fake event. So this is the FormAssembly form that connects directly back to our Salesforce org. So our project managers, our enrollment coaches, when they have a webinar or another event, they go in here, fill out this pretty simple form and of what they need, what programs are going to be involved, when students can actually sign up for, or what terms they're interested in, what programs. Then they click the submit button. And of course, it's taking a second. All right, they get a little thank you. The person that requested it will get a notification that theirs has been submitted. Then we'll dive into our Salesforce instance. And then we got rid of that Google Doc and created a series of list views that are filtered for whatever criteria we're looking for. So once that was submitted, myself, Megan, and the people that approve the content of each one of these events get a notification that a new event has been requested. That piles into our new not approved list views. So we can actually go into the event, and Megan on the other end is actually going to go ahead and approve it. And you can see right here, she's already clicked these 2 approval buttons, which automatically change the status to approved. And instead, and before the state, we actually had to copy and paste everything from the email and populate it into these fields. So this, the FormAssembly automatically populates and creates the record. All right, so which makes it so much easier, makes it saves so much time on our end. And then ultimately, I'm going to go to another example, just real quick, of one that we've had in the past. Bear with me, let me get to that one. Then ultimately, we take another step where we go back into FormAssembly and create the registration form for the prospective student. They go ahead and fill this out. This gets sent out in mass emails that we send out. And then once they fill out this, that collects back into our Salesforce org. And we click here to the related tab. And we can see all of those 16 people. This is an event that's happening next week. We can see 16 people have filled out that form and are going to attend the event. They're all right there connected to it, all their opportunities, and we can see that campaign impact that Megan was talking about earlier. So probably takes each time to set up an event, probably takes at least half the time than it did before we implemented the new process with FormAssembly. All right, so I'm going to kick it back to Megan.
Yeah, and just to sort of wrap it up, this isn't our only use case. We do this particular integration between FormAssembly and Salesforce has been incredibly powerful for us. It sort of powers everything that Megan O just showed you around the event management, but we also can use it for other anywhere where that you can imagine a form might come into play. We can set up a form in FormAssembly, spin it up really quickly, and have a really nice integration with Salesforce. So we've used it a few of our other use cases when we want to survey prospective students who raised their hand and said they were interested but never ended up applying. We can ask them why and track that back to Salesforce. We use it for our CRM compliance form for our users. So when we're setting up new users, they can sign off and we can track that back in Salesforce that they've signed off on all of the compliance pieces we need. We do gated videos, so kind of similar to webinars, but these are just recorded video sessions that we can gate with a form, so people have to sign up before they can see it. We use FormAssembly to generate text opt-ins that we can track back to Salesforce. And then the last two are leverage some Salesforce functionality called cases, where we can actually do ticketing and have people reach out to do either statement of purpose reviews, where our enrollment coaches are helping them review essays that they're writing to apply, or unofficial eligibility reviews, which we are about to pilot, where people can reach out, send us info about their transcripts and other information about themselves, and find out if they think they kind of hit the minimum bar to be eligible for a program. And like I said, those last two as well, like we all of it can get tracked back into Salesforce and leverage various functionalities that we have there. So so yeah, very powerful integration between FormAssembly and Salesforce that we've been using the last few years, and we can continue to build on as we go. So I think that's all we've got now. We can throw it back over to Laurel to do Q&A.
Great, thank you so much for this presentation. We have a question from Alan Nig, who asks, are the outbound mass emails delivered by SF or Eloqua or something else?
I can take that one. Yes, we use Eloqua, the mass marketing automation tool that's actually managed by Do It. And so we work really, really closely with them. One thing that I didn't show on the campaign record is actually I click a little button that automatically syncs it to Eloqua, so that the emails of all of those registrants, the reminder emails and that type of thing, will go directly into the Eloqua messaging.
Thanks, Megan. Jim Helwig asks, what are the 4 organizations again? Could you repeat that?
Yeah, let me get back to.
Yeah, there's that slide, I think. So ours was the first, the pre-enrollment org. We've got strategic partnerships, which kind of manages any of the sort of business engagement pieces from the UW side, and the Office of Business Engagement. It shepherds that one, but it has lots of partnerships on campus to help manage that. Learner success and IQ housing. So that one is all around managing COVID response and being able to quarantine students that are in housing. So that one was spun up very quickly by Do It, and that's used a lot the last year and a half or so. And then learner success is kind of currently getting built out more and more, but that'll eventually be kind of the place where anything related to current students is housed. But that's super high level. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I'm not seeing any additional questions in the chat right now. However, if you do have additional questions for Megan and Megan on Salesforce, you can go ahead and put those in the chat, and they should be able to answer them during the next presentation, or I'm sure they would be happy if you would like to email either of them as well. So I think we're going to go ahead then, and we're going to move on to our next presentation. So just give me one moment here to do that. So I'm going to just highlight our next speaker, David Schultz. So David Schultz is going to be presenting on web testing with Cypress, and he is currently the production software manager at Wisconsin Ice Cube Particle Astrophysics Center, where he has worked for 8 years now. This encompasses all user-facing software that is developed by the Wisconsin Ice Cube Particle Astrophysics Center, and he focuses on grid computing, infrastructure, and data management. And so with that, I'm going to turn things over to David.
Okay, can you hear me properly?
Yes.
Good. So yes, I'm going to be talking about website testing with Cypress. And this is more specifically for dynamically generated websites instead of content generated like WordPress. So I'll be covering that sort of a thing. So the first part is, what is website testing? Why would you want to do this sort of thing? Then some details about installing Cypress, some of the basic concepts for using it, some of the interesting examples from my work. This is a flash talk, so it'll go fairly fast. So part of the reason why you'd want to do web testing is if you came from traditional programming, where code testing is a very big thing. Any time that you write code, you verify the correctness of that code by writing unit tests or integration tests. And they're typically directly next to the code. They can be run on demand. They can be run as part of commit processes. They're considered very fundamental to development. And there's even a whole concept called test-driven development that's designed around this. And there's code covered requirements. There's other various things. It's basically testing is a thing that you do all the time. It's not something extra. But web testing is a bit different. In the browser, you don't have quite as good of tools. You don't have the long legacy from several decades of programming. So it's, how exactly do you do the same things that you would like to do at least? How do you test the layout or the presence of elements? Can you test what happens if a user clicks on something or if they enter an input field? And what do you want to do for cross-browser testing, since there's more than one browser? There is an existing tool that's been out for several years now called Selenium. I've used it before, and it's a fairly bare bones interface to interact with the browser from somewhere else. So from Python, for example, it has several wrappers and add-ons, but it's a very fragmented ecosystem. And because of its long history, there are some warts and other issues that it has. So it can be used, but there's not a lot of people that actually like using it. So fairly recently, I came across a tool called Cypress, which claims to be an all-in-one testing framework, assertion library. It has mocking and stubbing, and all without Selenium. Basically, the idea is that everything is included in one box. It can run on most web browsers. It runs in the same context as your site instead of externally. So it has access to the same DOM traversal and manipulation that any normal code would access. And also, it can do test-driven development, where if you change your tests or you change your code, it'll automatically rerun them, and you can see if it works or not. And also, it's fairly fast. It can run the tests. If you even have a lot of them, it runs them pretty quickly. There's several different ways to install Cypress. One is with npm or yarn if you have a Node.js project. You can also directly download the binary, which works well for any other type of project. And then you can run in Docker images. This is really good for continuous integration. Or if you just want to use the command line. It's very bad if you want to use the GUI, because launching browsers inside containers is difficult. So I'm just going over here some of the initial configuration. When you run Cypress, it will automatically create the basic structure for you. So it has 4 main directories of configuration. One is an integration directory where the tests actually go. It has a fixtures directory for common data files, which you may or may not use. It has a support directory for common code, which is a good thing if you share code. And it has a plugins directory if you ever wanted to extend Cypress for other use cases. There's also a JSON file with some basic options. I'm just listing the 3 of them that I currently use, but there's a list on their website with 20 or 30 different options. The main ones here are just a base URL for the static server that displays the site. And then I've just disabled screenshots and videos for our continuous integration runs. So this is what the app actually looks like if you open it up on a desktop. On the left is their specific app, and clicking on a test will actually start the browser with the test runner. So in this case, it's running Chrome, and this is just a simple test for basics. But you can see on the left part of the test, there's actually telling you what it's doing, and on the right part is actually what you normally see, which this test currently doesn't do anything, so it doesn't show much. So for writing tests, tests are JavaScript files that are in the integration directory, as I said before. They generally have a name, and then they end with spec.js. I think that's mostly just a common naming pattern that they've used. And here's the basic framework, which is what I showed on the previous slide. Is just you first you describe the test, and then you can have multiple instances or various tests. In this case, there's only a single test that's running, and it's just expecting true to equal true, which obviously works. For something that actually does interaction with the website, here we're using the visit command to load a website. You can technically load any website you want. Usually you load the actual website you're designing instead of some random website, but this is their example site. And then you can test to see if any element contains the word type in it. That's just a very simple test that you might want to run. And in the picture on the bottom here, you can see it first visits that website, and then it tests for the type, and everything is green, which means it all passed. So some more advanced things to do. We can click on elements. We can assert various things. So here we will check that when we click on the element that had the name type, then it should go to a new page with commands, actions as part of the URL. And then on that new page, it should have an input, and we can type an email address into that input and verify that the value of that is actually correct. So when you load this test, it looks like this. And you can see that on the left, it visited the page, it tested that we actually clicked that, and then it showed that it loaded a new page, and we have an element that we typed into. We can also do some various debugging tasks. Part of the reason why it has the bar on the left is so you can click things and debug them. Notice here that we clicked on a specific command, and we can see exactly what this command did and what element it's looking at, how many elements it found, and it even highlights the element up on the right. So that blurred section is called, this is the element that it has selected. So you can actually see if it selected the wrong element, where was that and why did it do that? Some common assertions that you may use, they have a whole library page on this, but here are some of the common ones. As if, say you wanted to verify that there are 3 list elements, and you can ask for that you found exactly 3 of them. You can also look for an input in a form and retry it until that it does not have a disabled class. You can look for a text area and verify that it has the correct value. You can look and see if an element is visible or is not visible. You can test whether an element exists or not. And you can even check it if radio boxes are checked or anything like that. You can also do plenty of things with text contents. You can test directly for a specific amount of text. You can also test if a word is included in the text, not necessarily the whole text, but just a single word. You can look for whether or not something contains something else. One of the nice things is you can also do pattern matching. So regular expressions are possible. And you can do case insensitive matching as well. You can also chain assertions. So you can have a single element that tests for multiple different things. So here we're testing for a class, an attribute, and a string somewhere in the attribute values. There are also ways to test networking requests. So here we're just testing to see that a get method to this URL actually happens. And it'll wait until that response happens or until it times out after a couple seconds. Or in this case, we can actually override the response and have it not even hit the server. So we can say, if this request happens, you give it this return value, and then later on we can test to make sure that it actually did that. There's also a few best practices that I just want to list here. Obviously you want to select elements as specifically as possible in case you change your page later. You also want to set a base URL in the config as I showed earlier. And then technically you can run a web server. You can run commands from inside Cypress, but you really shouldn't. You should run the web server from outside Cypress. Because the commands inside Cypress are blocking and they need to exit in order to continue the test. Here's just a couple of examples. On the top, we have updating a text field. So first, verifying that it has an existing value, then deleting that value and adding a new value. That's just something that I ran across, and it's probably good to show other people. And on the bottom is selecting a dynamically generated option. So it's if you're generating things from within JavaScript and it can change while the page is loaded, you may have to do some fancier things like this instead of just directly selecting it. Then one of the fun examples is faking out authentication. So assuming you have some JavaScript code that knows how to do authentication within your app, you can use something like this with some common code and loading that in to fake the authentication request and intercept whenever it's trying to do logins and say either you are already authenticated or catch when it tries to log in or log out. This is, you can extend this quite a bit to be useful for various cases, and they have documentation on other cases if you want those. So that's all I have.
Thank you so much, David. So we have a question wondering, can Cypress be used to detect dynamically created JS script elements that wouldn't appear in the DOM?
So that depends. I think everything must appear in the DOM at some point in order for it to be detected, but it doesn't have to appear at the beginning. It can appear at any point while the page is loaded.
Great, thanks. And then we also had a request to get some if it would be possible to get your presentation notes. Someone is interested in taking a look at that. And then also a question about if there is a license cost for this.
So it is free software, and you can use it as you want. They obviously also have a paid tier if you want to run on their servers, which if you want to do parallel testing, that's useful. But if you don't want to pay them at all, then you don't have to.
Great. It's always good when it's free, right?
Yep.
Are there any additional questions for either David or Megan and Megan? All right. Seeing none and knowing that we are at time, I think I'm just going to go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you. A big thank you to Megan and Megan for presenting about Salesforce, and to David Schultz for presenting this really interesting talk about Cypress. And stick around, we have lots of great sessions that are coming up. So we have a very short 15-minute break, and you can use that to go ahead and grab a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, a glass of water, and then come back around 2 o'clock for some more great sessions. So thank you very much, everyone, and have a great rest of your day. Bye.